I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're about to hear a chapter of my ongoing fantasy narrative. Like the Skalds of old, I've written it to be heard, not read, and there's no music, sound effects, or character actors. It's all me, and I do it in one single, flawless take. SKALD picks up where the previous episode left off, so if this is your first time out, you might be a little confused at the beginning. But you're pretty smart. I think you'll piece it together. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, Part 13. Maul fell to his knees. It wasn't just that he couldn't breathe, but that the air of his body was being sucked out. His lungs collapsing, the small hidden gaps in his joints expelling what little air they possessed, causing his entire body to crack, contract, and wither. Maul felt the skin of his face tighten, preventing his eyes from closing as he looked up at the monk, Xylan, who stood watching him, motionless. A surge of energy hit Maul, powered by his bottomless reserves of rage and fury. He arched his back and with a mighty effort filled his lungs with air, the exertion forcing blood vessels to burst inside his unblinking eyes. If he would die here, in the forest, so be it, but not without calling out the monk for what he truly was. You traitor! Xylan waved his hands dismissively, a look of derision on his face. It was a reaction to Maul's words, but also part of an effort to banish those floating, laughing, ringing lights that surrounded him, the wisps foolish enough to target the monk, and not the dying savage that lay at his feet. You've betrayed yourself, Maul. Betrayed yourself as an adherent to silly, outdated, ancient superstition. Suddenly, the massive cat SKALD came barreling out of the brush, rushing to the aid of her companion. But no sooner did she approach Maul than she too was surrounded by those ringing bells and dancing lights. Though she growled, bit and tore at the invisible wisps, they would not stop. They would not yield until all the air had been banished from their prey, leaving Maul and SKALD to die, to rot, and to decay, feeding and nourishing the forest where the wisps made their home. SKALD doesn't surprise me. She's a loyal beast, but a beast nonetheless. Xylan stepped back as the massive cat, in her rage, lashed out at the monk, desperate for her claws to connect with something they could actually draw blood from. These wisps, they're just avatars of some forgotten forest spirit. Still swinging his cudgel, a frantic expulsion of what energy he had left, Maul croaked. Ask for help. Speak with your gods. Xylan clenched his eyes shut, and he shouted. There are no gods. And as he did so, the wisps relented briefly, taken aback by the monk's vehemence, allowing Maul and SKALD both to suck some precious air into their spasming lungs. These wisps, don't you see? Don't you understand? They don't serve a god, at least as you understand it. They serve some idea, some nebulous concept. They are powerless without the power that you give to them, and now you allow them to take liberties with it. Maul spat out his words as the wisps, recovering from Xylan's outburst, descended back upon the still grounded savage. Powerless? They suck the very air from my lungs. And in whose name do they do it? You don't even know. I don't even know. No one can even remember. They are flitting bits of ancient nonsense from a world gone by, nothing more. And you would allow yourself to be laid low by them, felled by immaterial, transient ideals? What kind of warrior are you? I am the king of men. Maul attempted to stand, but with no air to nourish them, his limbs refused to obey, and he toppled over into the dirt, gasping for breath once again. If you are truly a king, rise up. Rise up above these common vestigial fears, these atavistic terrors that your forefathers made up just to keep you in line. Rise up, damn you. As Skog flailed in the dirt, Maul clawed at his skin, desperate to tear a hole in his throat, to break the seal, allowing air to rush into his dying body. Help me. Help yourself. Tell me, what is stronger, the idea of some decrepit, nameless deity, or the real, physical, in the flesh, one true king of men? Maul couldn't close his eyes. The skin of his face was pulled far too tight for that. He couldn't cover his ears, at least not well enough to block out the bells that now filled them, clanging with the wisp's laughter. But he did his best to push everything out nonetheless, to focus on Xylan's words and what they meant. The gods had never been friends to Maul, never blessed him, never offered their protection. The closest he had ever come was his deal with him. But even that had done far more harm than good. And what was that deal? What was it really? An opportunity for Maul to help himself, to use his strength, his drive, his power, his royal lineage to shed blood and wreak havoc for one of his unknown purposes. For his entire life, everything that Maul had ever had, none of it was anything that had been given to him. He had to take every single last bit of it, even his throne, which should have been handed to him, should have been bestowed upon him by the divine right those gods and their followers were so fond of invoking. Where was that throne now? Untold realms away, occupied by some unknown usurper. And what would have to be done? What did Maul have to do? He had to get there on his own power, not whisked away by some benevolent deity, and then kill anyone and everyone between him and what is rightfully his. Would there be a vengeful god to smite Maul's enemies? Would a mythical hero appear to help the king of men? Would Maul be gifted with a legendary weapon to make his trial easier? No, no, no. The gods would stand idly by. There would be no one to help Maul, and he would have to take the throne by himself, using only the might of his two calloused hands and the simple club he had torn from the world tree by his own hard-earned power and strength. What had the gods ever given Maul? What had they done to help him? They had done nothing but damn him from the very day that he was born, leaving him with nothing but his unshakable resolve. And now he and that resolve, he and his power and his strength, he, the one true king of men, would damn the gods themselves. Maul threw his arms wide, hands clenched into fists, and miraculously, the wisps, those intangible bits of light and ringing bells, they scattered, cast into the forest from whence they came. Clear to take a full breath of air, Maul breathed in deep and then roared, letting out a primal scream that shocked even Xylan, the godless monk who had egged the savage on. Maul yelled long, and he yelled hard, the exertion taking its toll. He became lightheaded, but he kept screaming as tunnel vision set in, the darkness growing around the edges, closing in on him, Maul's very subconsciousness threatening to overtake him. With that darkness came something else. He tried to stare straight ahead, to focus on the world, on that which he could see to be true, but at the corners of his vision, at the edges of his consciousness, waiting for him, like always, a grim reminder of where his allegiances truly lay. He heard the agonized screams. He smelled the burnt cinders beneath his feet, and through it all, he felt the laughter, a hateful guffaw that could only come from one place. That twisted, rictus grin. Though he struggled to push it out, He felt the fire lick up at him, heard the cries of those he had condemned to death, and the pleas of those who he would one day still condemn. Worst of all, he saw the antlers, shifting, taking form, then converging in the center of his vision, joining with the wicked smile that mouthed the words, "You are mine." For a moment, Xylan believed that it had worked. Maul had broken through faster than anyone he had ever heard of, certainly in less time than it had taken him to put aside the fears that had been bred into him, then reinforced relentlessly inside the monastery. Maul, through sheer force of will, had confronted the grim reality of the world and cast aside the weightless ideals that would literally suffocate him if given the chance. At the last second, the most crucial moment, something had snapped inside the savage, and he allowed the fear to come rushing in, and that was all the opening that the wisps required. As Maul and Skog neared death, Xylan crouched down, digging his fingers into the dirt, reaching his consciousness out, confronting the very soul of that forest, the twisted, moss-covered, wretched old wood god. Though he was a god in decline, he was a god nonetheless, and he still had enough power to command those wisps to overpower whatever fool might stumble into his domain. But though Xylan would himself admit to being a fool, he was a fool with the powers of an ancient order, one that had given power to the gods themselves, then accepted their power in return. The brand on Xylan's neck grew hot, it burned and it seared, and in response, the growth of the forest halted and retreated as flowers withered, fruits dried up, and the very leaves of the trees turned yellow, orange, red, and brown. The wood god knew that he was in the twilight of his existence, and he knew that though he might yet win this battle, he still had too much to lose to start a war. The wisps, their lights and their bells, they evaporated into the nothingness they had come from and which comprised their very being. Soon, Maul and Skog, both rendered unconscious from exertion and lack of air, came to. Xylan smiled as he offered to help Maul up. "I'm impressed, extremely impressed. You came so very close to banishing them by yourself and without any real training." The savage, indignant and furious, smacked away Xylan's hand and pushed himself up, weakened from his ordeal, but insistent that he stand upon his own 2 feet to air his grievances. "You stood and you watched us die." "If that was true, my king, then you wouldn't be standing now. Enough of your clever talk. Enough of it! We were surrounded, waylaid by some magical threat, and you just allowed it to happen. Did you find it funny? Is that why you laugh now? Is my very existence a joke to you?" "All of existence is a joke, my king. Unfortunately, just not a particularly funny one. You were never in any real danger, the entire time. Never in any real danger!" Maul seized Xylan by his robes, pulling him close enough that he could feel the savage's hot breath on his face. "They stole the air from our lungs. They had complete power over us," Xylan replied, unblinking. "They had only the power that you had given them. And ever so briefly, the power that you took back from them. Gods and their servants, all that they have ever had, is that which man chooses to bestow upon them. Nothing more and nothing less. How can you stand there and say that after what you just saw happen?" Because what just happened was that I showed you how to save yourself. And you nearly did it, ever so nearly, and you nearly did it by denying the wisps and their god the power that you had given them. And then, when it was necessary, I stepped in and I saved you. With an elegant twist, Xylan freed himself from Maul's grasp. You're welcome. You stand before me. And all that I've been through, you stand there after all I've suffered, and you tell me that the gods have no real power? No, my king. I tell you that they don't even exist. Unless you want them to. The most dangerous myth that's ever been told is that the gods made man, and not the other way around. Maul didn't know much of the world, its true nature, or really anything outside the tree where he had spent the bulk of his life, and the instincts for navigating conflict and bringing death that came so naturally to him. But though he was ignorant, he was not so blind as to be unaware of how little that he knew, or of how useful one such as this godless monk could be. I know not where the gods come from. That is for scholars and philosophers to bicker over in their schools and colleges. But I know that I have seen things. Terrors wrought by something beyond mankind. Horrors that would make even you cower and shake in their presence. Maul dropped himself back down on the ground next to Skog, who wrapped her massive furry form around him. They're out there, lurking, watching, biding their time, waiting to pounce upon me. But maybe with your training, with your knowledge of myths, your logic, maybe you can argue them into leaving us alone. Smiling his ironic smile again, Xylan crouched down and began to assemble kindling for a fire. I'll be honest, Your Majesty. I expected more of you than to be frightened of relics and children's stories. It's one thing to acknowledge power, and another one entirely to fear it. I do one, but never the other. Maul leaned back against Skog and closed his eyes. You have first watch, monk. Wake me before you try to convince any attackers that they don't exist. They were deep, deep down, hidden beneath the granite rock beds that gave their realm form. So deep that it had stopped getting cooler as they descended, and instead, the temperature began to rise. And there, in proximity to the oozing magma that formed the core of this particular shattered world, he hung, screaming, only pausing to occasionally spit out the red ants that crawled over his inverted form. Red ants driven mad, driven wild, furious over the loss of their once lush forest, mowed down to make room for the high elf cities. They sunk their mandibles into the Pharaoh's servant, letting their poison course through his emaciated, quivering body. A set of doors opened, allowing light to fill the dark, muggy torture chamber, and with the light, seeming to both ride upon it and emit it from her very person, was the Queen of the Elves, Enlith, flanked by two of her frowning priests and a single, stoic advisor. Please, make them stop. I've told you everything I know, please. The Pharaoh begged, crying, undignified, shameful, the tears forcing their way through the ravenous ants that covered his skin. I promise you, please. The priests, acting on some predetermined order, held up their hands and closed their eyes as a gust of cool, misty wind swirled about the room, causing the ants to drop from their prey, falling harmlessly to the ground below. Though the ants were gone, the Pharaoh still appeared completely red all over, his skin raw, inflamed, and bloody. Thank you, my queen, thank you. I promise that. Where is he? Enlith scowled as she shook an errant red ant off her boot. I swear, I swear to you, I do not know. He's insane, violent, an animal, nothing. Liar. If you had not seen him, then where did you obtain this? Enlith held up a small clay pot housing a tiny, sprouted plant. A baby ash tree. A sprig of the world tree, of my world tree, that you were caught trying to sell. Seeing his salvation slip away before his eyes, the Pharaoh, swinging wildly from his chains, began to weep once again. I admit it. I stole it. I stole it from him as he slept in the arbor, but I do not know where he is now. I know nothing. I know nothing. The only thing I know is that the chieftains, they search for him. Even now they search for him. Enlith scowled, pinching the bridge of her nose. Still nothing new. Nothing helpful at all. I could help you. I could return to them. They would allow me back in. I know it. I could find out more. A spy, your spy. I could find out more and return to you. I promise that I will not let you down, my queen. He's useless. The queen spoke to her attendants, who nodded gravely. One of the priests, eager to please, offered, "Shall we allow his interrogation to continue, your majesty?" Though the pain of moving his ruined flesh was excruciating, the Pharaoh flailed, desperate to free himself, wailing in agony. "Please, no, have mercy. Don't let the ants come back. Please, your highness, have mercy." Enlith stared at the Pharaoh, a look of disgust on her face. "I will not have it said that the Queen of the Elves is without mercy." Oh, your highness, thank you, bless you. I shall pledge my undying allegiance to you and your house and your reign. I promise you, you shall not regret this. No, you shall not regret it, I promise. The queen turned to her priests. "Is the Feldrun ready?" The Pharaoh's eyes grew wide, and his pledges of allegiance ground to a halt as his body began to shake uncontrollably. No, please, not that. No, anything but that. The priest, bracing himself for his liege's anger, spoke delicately. "It is not, your majesty. It is still growing, and it needs time yet to reach maturity." Enlith turned, ready to leave the chamber. "It will need all the strength it can get to track and subdue the beast. Let it eat." Though there was no love lost between the High Elves and the Pharaoh, this particular punishment was extreme, even by Enlith's standards. So as they left the chamber, the priest and the advisor cast sad, knowing, terrified glances at the Pharaoh, who now screamed in wild, unhinged panic. "Please, no, I'll take the ants. Send them back. Please, the ants, please, I beg of you, the ants." But even the ants knew better, as all living creatures fear the Feldrun. Not intellectually, as truthfully, the Pharaoh had never even heard the word before. But its name was spoken in a tongue both ancient and potent, and thus it instilled fear in all those who heard it, a fear that strikes the very soul, a fear primal and unyielding. The ants scattered, forcing themselves back into their holes as the door on the far side of the chamber began to open slowly, operated by the arcane machinery of the High Elves and their dwarven allies. "I'll do anything, absolutely anything. Please, no, don't, no." Suddenly, the doors swung open wide, and the Feldrun's form filled the doorway, blocking the light, emerging as a terrible shadow, a dream of true horror, a memory of a nightmare. It staggered forward, unsure of its own body and the foul, unnatural substance that passed for its flesh. Too frightened to lay eyes upon the Feldrun, the Pharaoh clenched them shut as it approached, breathing heavily, filling the room with its sweet scent of decay. The Pharaoh died screaming before the Feldrun even made contact, his heart giving out from sheer terror. But as he gave up the ghost, the Pharaoh heard the Feldrun speak. "I'm sorry. I am so very sorry." If you dig Skald, please leave a good review on iTunes, Stitcher, or preferably both. It's a great, completely free way to help out the only story that matters. If you're looking for an even better way to help Skald and make sure it's here waiting for you every Thursday morning, contribute to the show on Patreon. You can pledge as little as $1 a month. That's just $0.25 per show. And if you want to donate more, say $10 a month, well, then you're getting into shout-out rewards territory, like the Parker family of Richmond, Virginia, who pledge a whopping $20 each and every month. Nate and Lillian are two of my favorite, no, scratch that, they are my absolute, undisputed favorite Skald listeners, and I am thrilled to have them along for the ride. Make sure to go check out the awesome company run by their parents, Ryan and Sarah. It's called Milk and Honey Luxuries, and you can find it at milkandhoneyluxuries.com. They have a ton of amazing gifts for family and friends, including engraved spoons and forks, handmade cutting boards, and their very own coffee. I love their stuff, and you will too. To sign up, get great rewards, or just toss Skald $0.25 per episode, head to patreon.com/Skald. Signing up is safe, secure, and easy. You know what else is easy? Finding me online. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, they're all just Aubrey Sitterson. AubreySitterson. No spaces, no numbers. Or head over to my website, aubreysitterson.com, spelled the same way, for links to everything, including social media, my non-Skald related projects, comics, podcasts, t-shirts, credits, bio, and contact information. Finally, if you're enjoying Skald, tell everyone. Shout it from the rooftops, wear a sandwich board around town, force your Lyft customers to listen to the show. Whatever it takes. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.